In a new court filing, the New York prosecutor seeking President Trump's tax returns is citing reports of, quote, protracted criminal conduct at the Trump Organization. This comes just weeks after the Supreme Court ruled against Mr. Trump's assertion that a sitting president was immune from investigation. It also comes as the Trump administration continues to struggle with presenting a united front when it comes to messaging on the pandemic. Over the weekend, Dr. Deborah Birx, the coordinator of the coronavirus task force, issued a warning about the virus's growing threat. The president later attacked her using the word pathetic. He also continues to send conflicting messages about the advice of task force members. And while he promised to bring back coronavirus task force briefings, members of that group have been noticeably absent from the president's recent afternoon press events. More than 4.5 million Americans have tested positive, and over 150,000 have died from COVID-19. Right now, there is no national response plan. Even as the number of cases spike, the White House's focus is on putting kids back in school. But according to a new article from Politico, the president may soften his stance and reverse course on his push to open schools. Anita Kubar joins me now. She is a White House correspondent and associate editor at Politico and wrote that piece. Hi there, Anita. Before we talk about the coronavirus response, I want to ask you about New York prosecutor Cy Vance's push to get the president's tax returns. What was the basis of today's court filing?
Well, the court filing, this has been going on for quite some time where the prosecutors are trying to get those returns. What's happened at the Supreme Court level that you just mentioned is it sort of paves the way. The Supreme Court is saying that the prosecutors can get those tax returns if they have the basis for it, if there's enough evidence to prove that they can get those. So they still have to jump through all the hoops. And what they're saying today in this court filing is that there is a broader criminal investigation going on than we knew. This still may take a really long time. This does not mean anything will happen tomorrow. It is likely not to happen before the election. And remember, when prosecutors or if prosecutors get these tax returns, it doesn't necessarily mean they'll become public. If Congress had gotten them, which of course they lost that case, they would probably make those public. But prosecutors generally don't do that. So we don't know if they would become public in the first place.
All right, well, let's turn to the pandemic. Several of the president's physicians have been at odds with public health experts. First, he pushed states to reopen sooner than his own public health advisors said was safe. Then there's the outbreak linked to his Tulsa rally, though most recently he did cancel plans for a gathering at the Republican National Convention that had been scheduled for this month in Florida. What about schools, though, Anita? What is the latest on the administration's push to reopen them?
It seems very inconsistent, just like some of the things that you mentioned. He has been pushing for schools to open, and he still is pushing for that. He wants schools to open in person, but just in the last few days, he has said, well, there are some schools that maybe can't open. So there seems to be some realization that not every school is going to be able to open in person. It was only a few weeks ago that he was holding events that are designed specifically to push schools to open. And if you remember, he threatened schools and said he would take away federal aid from them if they did not open. So we haven't heard him mention that as much lately. And on Capitol Hill, he is supporting schools getting more than $100 billion to reopen their doors. So he is saying that they should be funded, but he still wants them to be open if they can.
Let me ask you about Dr. Birx. Yesterday, White House Coronavirus Task Force Coordinator Dr. Deborah Birx said that we are in a new phase of the pandemic, which is, quote, extraordinarily widespread. Well, today the president used the word pathetic in a tweet about her. Now, Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany recently called Dr. Birx an extraordinary doctor. So, Anita, what did Dr. Birx do to upset the president?
Well, this goes what House Speaker Nancy Pelosi just said about her last week that my colleagues actually reported, and then she said again over the weekend publicly that she has concerns with Dr. Birx. She thinks that she is working for President Trump and is not being critical enough. As you know, President Trump has said some things that are questionable, that he keeps changing his message. He wants things to open when things are not safe at the moment in many places. So, it seems the president was very fed up with her when this weekend she seemed to go out and say, be critical not of him, but saying that the coronavirus is worse than we had realized. It's widespread across the country. He did not like that, and he called her out on that. It was very striking because he has not been critical of her. We have seen him being critical of Dr. Fauci, but not Dr. Birx, and so that was very striking to me that he went there.
Yeah, it's something that we hadn't really, as you note, seen before. Meantime, you have millions of Americans, as you know, Anita, who are in these dire financial straits. And Congress and the White House failed to reach a deal on a new COVID-19 relief package. The previous one expired at the end of July. So what's the latest on negotiations and who's leading them?
The latest is that they're still talking, but they're still very, very far apart. There are fundamental differences on what should be included in this recovery bill. It's not even just a matter of how much money, which that's still an issue, but what they should fund. So, for example, Democrats are really pushing for a significant amount of money for local governments, and the Republicans aren't. So there's a wide variety of things that they disagree on. I would say the thing that they're talking about right now that they disagree on, what to do with these unemployment benefits. As you know, that was $600 a week that you mentioned expired last week. Democrats want to keep the $600 a week intact and keep going forward with that. Republicans had wanted to reduce that to $200 a week, so very significantly different there. At the moment, Republicans had offered to just continue on with the $600 a week while they continue to negotiate this broader deal. But the Democrats don't want to do that. They want a bigger deal. They want all these other things, funding for schools, funding for the post office, dealing with the, voting in the fall. And so they're sort of at an impasse right there. And you asked who was involved. I think it's striking who's not involved. You're not seeing President Trump in the meetings every day, whereas you might have seen another president, doing that, or a vice president. You're seeing the Treasury Secretary and the White House Chief of Staff work on behalf of the administration. The other striking thing is that the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is not in the meetings either. So it's really the House Democrats and then these two representatives of the administration trying to work out that deal right now.
All right, so many people anxious to see what comes out of those negotiations. Finally, Anita, I want to turn to the social media app TikTok. What is the latest on the administration's threat to ban it?
Well, we mentioned how the president's been back and forth on a lot of things, and this is another one. If you'll remember, a couple of days ago, he said that we had long been waiting for this for weeks and weeks, that he had said he was finally had decided that he was going to ban the app in the United States. What form that would take was a little bit unclear. He didn't elaborate. Now we've seen a couple days later, today, he is saying, well, I'm going to hold off on that and see if TikTok could be bought. And so, as you know, Microsoft had expressed an interest in doing that. And so that's been put on hold. The banning has been put on hold to see if a U.S. company could buy TikTok, and so it would still be available. What President Trump said today was very interesting, though. He said if that happens, he doesn't want China to get all the money. Obviously, this is a Chinese firm or a Chinese company. He wants some of that to come to the U.S. government. He did not elaborate, and it's a little bit unclear what he means by that. How would money come into the U.S. government by this sale of a private company?
All right, we'll continue to watch it. Anita Kubar of Politico, a busy Monday. Thank you very much, Anita.
Sure. Thanks.